In Conversation with Terry Shepard, award-winning broadcaster, narrator, and author. A deep dive into the writer's craft with the artists and support systems who create the stories we love.
Today's guest laces up for more than miles. Stephen Postema is here to talk about his new book, Running Around Town, a spirited tour of how a city reveals itself at street level. Part memoir, part field guide. It follows the rhythms of early sidewalks and late-night avenues, the unexpected conversation at crosswalks, and the small epiphanies found between stoplights, skyline, and a life growing up in the city of Ann Arbor. Stephen Postema, welcome to the conversation.
Thank you so much. It's really a pleasure to be here, and having talked with you, a fellow Ann Arbor Pioneer High School grad who's doing writing down in Florida now. It's a pleasure to be on your show, and I had the opportunity to meet you by chance. Somebody told me you were in the business, and we got talking. I said, I've got this thing, and you said, keep going, and I did.
Tell us what the story is about.
The story is about growing up in the 1960s and the 1970s in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And so really focuses on between 1963, when our family came here, and 1977, when I left for college. And those were some great years, both politically, musically, and obviously formatively for me, being junior high and high school. And so they're observations of a boy at different age levels, watching what's going around town. And I had the unusual vantage point because my father had a campus ministry in the epicenter of the University of Michigan. He ran a homeless shelter out of the basement. And my brother and I, starting at the age of 13 and 11, in violation of the child labor laws, cleaned this chapel on Saturday morning, interacted with all these people, and our reward was we had the afternoon off in Ann Arbor, Michigan, to go down Southview to the Diag, to the record shops, to the candy stores, to the bookstores, and to interact with people who were all over the town. And that was quite an interesting thing, an opportunity to have as a young person.
How did you become a runner?
I start out saying something that was very familiar to people in the 1960s, fear. We had this program where moms put a helping hand that were blue, disembodied hands in the window, and it was for a place of refuge if anybody was coming after you, you need help. I hadn't listened very well to this description in kindergarten. I thought these helping hands at a house meant the house was bad, and you had to run like hell past this house. So I'm running past this house. Finally, my brothers probably told me, it's like, I didn't get it right. It's really, these are safe places. And if you need help, you can go there. But my young mind, I'm thinking, why does this neighborhood have to have all of these safe places? Are we a magnet for predators? So I just kept running. And then that's the origin of it. So it was really out of fear. And then gradually it became a way to compete because I was very competitive. And every kid in the 1960s had to run the 600-yard run. You did at Slauson. The federal government mandated the testing. And our neighbor was a congressman. And I thought all this data was going into the federal database. So I wanted to look good for my congressman. And I was going to really do well in the 600-yard run. And then I was competitive, and gradually it was a way for me to run. I ran long distance and watched my town. So that's the origin of that.
What was your best time in the 600?
Oh, the 600 was the longest run in 7th grade. And I believe I'd have to look at, I still have the little clipping of it from the all-city meet where I beat the very handsome, long-haired kids from Tappan who just looked so fabulous. And I wished I looked like that. And because I didn't, I was determined to beat them. And so I think it was around 127 or 126 in 7th grade. And then the next year, you gradually moved up to the half mile. And then by 9th grade, I was running the mile, a 2 mile on the cross country team.
I thought if I could do less than 2 minutes in the 600 that I was doing pretty good. That's a great time.
Yeah, it was fast. And the coach said, you could be the fastest. And once he told me I could be the fastest kid in the city, man, that really got me going. And then each year it was something else. You could be the best in the county. You could be the best in this or that. And it just appealed to me. And like I said, I'm a competitive person. And so that got me going.
We're talking about Running Around Town, written and experienced by our guest, Stephen Postema. His website is author Stephen Postema, spelled Postema, authorstephenpostema.com. You were, in those days, my friend, a Renaissance man. You were a very good student. You were a musician, and you were an athlete. Why so much diverse interest?
I had my parents were very interesting. My dad was a pastor. At his chapel, there were law students, med students, engineering students. I just thought everybody went on to get a PhD or a MD or a JD or whatever. So there was a lot of education in our family. So we were interested in a lot of things. And my dad was very interested in music. And you'll know this, but I talk about Ann Arbor is fortunate to have one of the most famous folk music venues in the entire country, called the Ark. It was started 60 years ago in 1965, and I have a story about that and my dad's involvement. My dad was one of four. My dad just liked students and liked music, and they got this thing going. It was four pastors, actually, and gradually it became independent. But so there was always music around, and once you get into church music and then folk music, rock's not far away, gospel. You can just listen to all the people who did Blowin' in the Wind, which was one of my favorite things. And you've got Johnny Cash, you've got Stevie Wonder, you've got Sam Cooke, and everybody's doing it. Bob Dylan wrote it in 10 minutes. Once you get in, so that's the whole musical component of it. And so that covers that. And then sports, I always liked running, and I played basketball. Cassie Russell, the famous U of M basketball player, the most famous athlete in Ann Arbor in the 1960s. Every kid had his picture from the bank in number 33 with his arms out, posted on the wall. And so for a while, I was going to do everything that Cassie Russell did, and I was going to be a pro basketball player. And I kept going with that finally I had to decide in 9th or 10th grade, I need a plan B because I'm not going to make it as a pro basketball player, but I love to play. And you just walk around Ann Arbor with a basketball, and you played at all of the parks, and it was a way to meet people. So all of those things gave great social. 60s and 70s was a very social time for a kid. You were out and about. Your kids booted you out of the house, or your parents booted you out of the house. They didn't watch you on a nice day in the summer. You were out. And you didn't come home until 6 o'clock. They didn't know where you were, and you just made your way in the world. That's how it was.
There is a saying that preachers' kids often find their way into mischief. And in the book, there are several stories of you doing just that. What is one of your favorites?
I had a cop next door, and that was great. He believed society was in decline. In fact, you'll know this. Early on, I thought he was the police chief because I thought he had the best job in the city of Ann Arbor. He ran the bullhorn at Stadium in Maine next to the U of M Michigan football stadium. He directed the traffic with a bullhorn. That is a key position. So I listened to him, and he thought society was in decline. But I'm telling you, it was not in decline at the corner of Stadium in Maine on football Saturdays, and he made sure of that. And my related to running, I had a really broad view of schools, city, and U of M property. I thought this was public property, and I thought it was seriously underutilized after hours. And I'm not the only kid who did that. We got into the schools to play after hours. We roamed around. We knew our way to the IM building to get in when you're young to play against college students. You snuck into the libraries just to walk around and look at the students and look at the books. It was just a fun thing to do. I have a story about crashing a law school dance. When you're 16, you believe that you can pass yourself off as a 25-year-old law student. Running, and there was a lot of trespassing, and I don't deny that. I eventually became the city attorney, and I had to enforce all the rules of the city. That there's a certain irony about that. But when I was young, in my young mind, if we had infractions, we had to sit in my dad's study, which, so what? It's a place, it's a lair of 1,000 books. It was, so what if you got in trouble? You sat there, and as to trespassing, if you're religious, on Sunday, you say, forgive us our trespasses. And I'm a kid, I'm going, what's the point of asking for forgiveness if I haven't done any trespassing? So I just kept track of all the places I trespassed. I'd confess. I'd have to sit in the chair. I could read all these books, and one thing led to another. That was, look, we didn't vandalize things. We didn't steal things. If you could find yourself and all of a sudden you're in a chemistry building at the U of M, it was just cool. I don't know how to explain it. It was just being there, being in Vet's pool at 3 a.m, floating on your back, looking up at the stars. It was fun. And so if you trespassed, you had to be good at running, and I was good at both.
We're talking with Stephen Postema about his book, Running Around Town, the website, author StephenPostema.com. Another theme that runs through this story is your developing interest in girls.
Yeah, so
tell us about that.
So there's a nice piece that I call the list that involves great Ann Arbor lore, and that is, it came on the night of it was November 1973, when the famous 10-10 tie of the U of M Ohio State game. It was rainy. Everybody was miserable here and in Ohio. Those two entire states were miserable because a 10-10 tie is nobody's satisfied. I had been trying to scalp tickets. I lost money on it. I didn't know it was illegal. I found that out the next year, but I lost money on this. And so I sought solace in two things that I loved, and their themes too, music and mathematics. And so I'm doing my geometry. I had a beloved teacher, and I'm listening to soul music, which in Ann Arbor, there were stations you could listen to. And suddenly you're a kid in Ann Arbor, but you're listening to Percy Sledge, you're listening to Sam Cooke, you're listening to Stevie Wonder, you're listening to all of Motown. And I overdosed on soul music. And while I'm doing my math, I'm gradually tapping my pencil, and the OJs come on. And with Love Train, which was really about universal love, but it was so encouraging to get on board. I'm in 9th grade. I figure, man, I got to have a girlfriend. I'm in 9th grade now. So I'm going to write out an axiomatic Euclidean axioms for 10 things for a girlfriend. I write it out. The first one, mathematical interest. The second, interest in basketball she has to have. And the third, the girl needs to watch like MASH and a show called Kung Fu that all boys love. And I don't think any girls watched, but they might have. But I had a great confidant. I made out this list. I went up the street to a young woman who was a confidant in junior high. I took her this list. She looks at it. She looks at me and she says, we got to sit down here. And she sits down. She takes pity on me. She helps me rewrite this thing, adds things like friendliness and whatever. And she says, by the way, you might want to look for a girlfriend in your math class. And sure enough, I did. And I found one, but it only lasted, she was older. It only lasted about 4 months, which is a long time for 9th grade. And my confidant assured me after I got a letter saying she was moving on to someone who was in college, a math major who had a car and a mustache. I was in just after 9th grade. I couldn't compete with that. So anyways, but gradually music, you had to be in love when you listen to that music. And part of the theme from this, everybody can remember certain things. And I have a nice piece about being in the High School Musical, and I had a dance partner, and I really liked her. And we're at the final dance at the cast party, and Stevie Wonder's playing, signed, sealed, delivered, I'm yours in the background, and the moon is out. And I could have had the best thing in the world. My partner asked me, so what are you going to do now with all of the time now that this play is over? And we had been dance partners and singing. Again, the questions as big as the moon, as leading as the moon was big. And Stevie Wonder, I'm yours, is like a neon sign down the path. And all I can say to this is I really got to catch up on my calculus homework. And I went home that night, and it just ate at me. I could have had just the fabulous rom-com situation, but that's not how life is. And it gnawed at me for a week, and I just realized that answer was not the right answer. The calculus homework was not right. And a week later, I go back to her and I say, maybe we'll go out and we'll go see One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And so that went from there. And we started to date. And a month later, my girlfriend gives me a list, says we should go to college together. And she has four colleges. I'm saying, man, that's way too much. You had to type these applications and it had to be perfect. I couldn't do 4. My life depended on it. So she brought it down to 2. And I said, okay, we'll get this going. And sure enough, we got into the same colleges and we went off to college and got married. She was always amused to me and she always encouraged me. And plus her father was a prominent law professor. And so he got me interested in law. So everything's connected: music, love, career. It's all interconnected and it's random things. What's the likelihood that some girl gives you a note in AP American history with Mrs. Sontag and says, we'll go to college together and here's my colleges, and it all works out. People had big influence and that's just the way it is.
The book is Running Around Town, written by our special guest, Stephen Postema from Ann Arbor, Michigan, which also happens to be my hometown. What are some of your favorite location memories in Ann Arbor?
Yes, the diag of is the central of the U of M campus, and it's this big square where all of the students hang out. And for us, it was like a rec room, a big rec room. We would just go watch the students, and I would engage it. I was really into selling things for Cub Scouts, or you had to sell candy bars for Sloss and Band, and these horrible big candy bars. And students were kind. They'd take pity on you. They would buy things, or alumni would come by and give you $20 and not even want the candy bars. And so being around the diag was really important. I mentioned Discount Records, just going to talk to people. I'd go in and Janis Joplin, A Piece of My Heart, would be on playing, and I'd ask some clerk about that. And I'd think, man, this woman with her purple glasses and her frizzy hair, she is one passionate singer. Or they would say, hey, you like this song? You got to listen to Stevie Wonder. And so I got into Stevie Wonder. He was, I think in 66, he was 16 out of Detroit. And so I started following him and got interested in that. So down on campus, the Arboretum, which is this big natural place down near the river, was always a place to run. And kids liked to be there and just be away from their parents. And parents didn't know where you were. And so you were just, again, running around. So it was beautiful too. And that was really important. The Pioneer High School track is one of my favorite places still. I get there all the time. My coach, 86 years old, is still the coach of the Pioneer cross country and track team. He came in 1968. And so,
Don Sleeman, yeah.
So I go there several times a week, and it really gets the creative juices flowing. And because this book is not just nostalgia for nostalgia's sake. It's really about influences that people had. Sometimes they're positive, but not all the time. I got my hair lit on fire with a Bunsen burner in Mr. Masty's class. And it was actually by a friend, and I had this whole interaction with the principal, who had heard that I was running a trading outfit in my locker based on my mom's baked breads, and she was a really good baker. And so that little interaction, but years later, the same kid just saved me from getting hit on the head at Pioneer with a baseball bat. You just came up behind me. So the Pioneer track, that's very influential. And those are some of my main places that I really liked.
In the middle of this Ann Arbor adventure, your parents told you that they were pulling up stakes and you were going to be going to California.
Right.
Why?
So my dad, 68 and 69 were probably, in all the years that I've lived, probably the most difficult time with the shooting of Martin Luther King Jr., Bobby Kennedy, and then the election of Nixon at the time was, at least in Ann Arbor with the students, people were very distressed about things. And of course, the war in Vietnam, there were a lot of opposition. And so there was just a lot of turmoil. And so I think it's wore my dad down. And so he gets this bright idea that he's going to take a sabbatical and we're going to go to Berkeley, California in 1969-70. So we're
out of the frying pan into the fire.
well,
You did.
and my mom was fabulous. We leave on the night. There was a huge 4-day student protest that started June 16th, I think, of 1969. We're 2 days into it. My dad calls back for something. It's 1 block over from his chapel, and he's telling us that the city's just there's a lot going on here. And my mom, who is a very good foil in this whole book because she's observing all these things. And she says, yeah, I'm sure maybe Berkeley will be a lot more peaceful than Ann Arbor this year. And so we head back and we get there. We go through Cuernavaca, Mexico, a 5,000-mile detour. We're in a pop-up camper. We look like we're part of some commune. And we end up in Berkeley, right near the campus, in a place for homeless people who were living on the street. They didn't call homeless people, but they were there. My dad hadn't lined up housing, and I get a paper for my mom. I bring it back to her. The serial killer is on the loose in the Bay Area. Charles Manson is moving up north from the South, and we're just looking at all these things. And so we had to get a house quickly, get off the streets. And the whole time, the music, The Age of Aquarius, is going through my head. And I'm looking at it, but living on the streets of Berkeley with a family, it was not ideal. It was not an ideal place to be. But in hindsight, it's just funny. And I got robbed at a riot later in 1970. There was a Hare Krishna. There were peace protesters who dropped their peace protest signs, shook me down for all my cash that I had earned. I was going to go buy stamps, and my mom had told me not to go down. And sure enough, I got robbed. They took one shoe and all my cash, and I had to go back and confess my sins back there. And but Berkeley was as wild as possible. But yeah, as far as running, I ran that whole year because I'd go off to school, and my brother would say, "Man, you better watch out for that Zodiac man." And so I just sprint to school. So that was a wild year and really gave me much more street smarts because we actually lived on the border in Richmond, California, which is just a fascinating city. And suddenly every possible ethnic group and religious group is in this city. And historically, I learned later through a book that it was the most diverse city in the country for a number of reasons. And so suddenly I just have a whole different view than the Midwest and Ann Arbor. And then I come back to Ann Arbor the next year being a well-traveled, but I could suddenly tell everybody about my travels in California. And that really opened my eyes. Sure.
As you look back over the decades, many of which were spent on Covington in Ann Arbor, Michigan, what do you think the takeaways are from this story?
I think the takeaways there's a couple takeaways. One is the interconnectedness of people. And when you look back, there are little things that you say, why did I turn this way? Or why did I become interested in that? Might have been a teacher who was kind. It might have been you went another way because somebody was mean in this direction, so you went in a different direction. So it's interesting looking back on how you developed. And oftentimes it was even small interactions with people or big ones like my girlfriend who says, hey, we're going to college together. That completely changed my life. And so it's the interconnectedness with people, and whether it's chance or providential, I don't know. I have a whole story about going to the first hash bash and helping somebody. And then I don't want to spoil it, but later she comes back to me. She goes 4 years later, I meet her again and she helps me on a little thing. It's, you wonder how your life turned out, but looking at it is really an interesting exercise. And the main thing is, in the theme of the book with the music, and I know you love music, is that the music really can help bring back those memories now. And for a lot of things, it's really powerful. But also the music then got me talking to people. Every kid on Sunday, oftentimes you looked at the Detroit Free Press, they had the top 40 songs and the top 40 R&B. And what was interesting is everybody, black and white, looked at both those same lists, and that next week talked about it. Usually not all top 40, but sometimes people would say, why is this one down here? I like this. But you had basically the top 10 in each. That's 20 songs that everybody was talking about the same music. And that was very powerful.
The book is Running Around Town. The website, author Stephen Postema, Postema, Stephen Postema, author StephenPostema.com. And he has been our special guest today. A walk down memory lane. It is a book that I highly recommend. You don't have to have grown up in the Ann Arbor area in the 60s to find some experience there that you can totally relate to. You don't even have to be our age. It is a wonderful coming of age story told in a series of short essays that are as powerful as they are beautifully written. Stephen Postema, it's great to see you. Thanks for the conversation.
Yes, thanks. It's been really fun to come on and talk about it. And it's been really fun to suddenly have written something that strangers just write me. They find me on Facebook, or they find me through my law practice, or they find me. I'll just get an email that says, you don't know me. I just finished your book, but let me tell you about this. I was moved by this, and this is what it meant to me. That's exactly why I wrote it. And that is a really good feeling.
In Conversation with Terry Shepard is a copyrighted presentation. All rights reserved. I'm Lisa Davis. Join Terry Shepard next time in Conversation.